Good evening. How's everybody doing? It is September the 13th, and it's not even a Friday. This is a bunch of bullshit I want to recount. On on tonight, like the show, when your show hits the wall, we're going to be talking about when your game hits the wall. Because that guy over there should be the host, because he's definitely better at this nonsense than I am. But because he has an active life, everybody, it's called active. He has things he needs to do during the day. This dumb bastard is the one who gets ponied up. So a little bit of horse trading. It's okay. We can all live with this, right? Anyways, so boys and girls, well, all children of all ages, we're going to talk about when your game, yes, your game, you DMs out there who are running campaigns, what happens when your game hits the wall? I mean, boom, hits the wall, made a mess in the bed scenario. There's just no recovering. Sometimes there is, but most times there's not. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I have DM'd not as long as the guy next to me, or I don't know how long Mark has DM'd, but I'm assuming he's probably done a little bit longer than I have.
I don't know. It's not that long.
Or not. Okay.
For me, it's not really like first time I did it, but you know how often I've done it. Particularly, it's something I do often.
That's right. It's quantity, not quality. Hold on. I'm turning green in the face. Let me fix this really quick. All right. That's slightly darker, but I'm not green. Okay. Jade, I've been at your table multiple times over the years. Could you honestly say you've had a game that's hit the cliff?
Oh, yeah, multiple times. Over my 25-ish years of gameplay and game mastering, I'd have to say that most of my games, if I want to say 90% of my games, hit some kind of dead end at some point. Whether it's I'm being lazy and don't want to figure out what comes next, or the players have done something so absolutely bonkers that I can't fathom what comes up next. Like they've just gone so far out into the right field that I'm just like, I thought you said you're going left. Why'd you go right? Now I have no idea what to do. It's that old adage, anything the game master plans, the players will inevitably do something counter to everything the game master thinks up.
Well, there's also that old saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Yep.
And for this implementation, the enemy would be the players. He looks like to say, players are the natural enemy of a good story.
They can be, yes. But no, I'm going to say probably about 90% of my games hit some kind of wall that puts the game in danger. It puts like that group in danger of not continuing with the next week. It's happened. And I will say that I've run a good chunk of my games, not once, but at least twice. And the second time around, it's typically better because I learned what the mistakes were of the first one.
Players. Just throwing that out there.
Players. Oh, no, sometimes it's me.
I normally, as a DM, say the players. Therefore, when I get fired, I can honestly say it wasn't my fault. Anyway, what about you, Mark? Have you DM'd? Have you been in any games that just did not cut mustard?
I can think of one where the guy was trying to literally make up everything between sessions as the DM, and eventually he just got to the point where he was just taking so much time between sessions preparing for the next session that he just couldn't keep it up. Because like prior to starting the first session, he'd actually written out a large chunk of what he wanted to do. But after we started playing, he just couldn't keep it up. And he was okay. It's like, basically it's like think Minecraft, but with 5e rules. And but like so some of the stuff is Minecraft logic, not 5e logic. And that was basically what he was doing, only he was creating everything himself and not using a module.
Did I miss the boat here? Was there a special train that did a Minecraft RPG and I just wasn't invited to?
No, the Minecraft aesthetic was him doing homebrew.
Okay.
Okay.
That was the rail I missed. Okay. So, wait, what? Like someone put. I mean, I've heard of Game Masters.
I mentioned that he was using D&D 5e and just, but yeah, it's like I didn't explain that the Minecraft stuff was actually just homebrew and analogies he would use to describe the world and blah blah blah.
You know, I this is kind of an aside topic, but I've heard of some game masters actually putting in the time in like creative mode Minecraft and making a virtual game space for players, and where they all, you know, it's kind of like the VTT that all the players log into. It's Minecraft. I've heard of that.
Dungeon. I could see making a dungeon in there with a well, it doesn't matter, but yeah, I could definitely see a dungeon being made in there.
So just a side thought, you know, when you brought up Minecraft, you know, as far as like homebrew mechanics for 5e, and I'm like, I've heard of game masters doing that before. Anyway, so what about you, Connell? You ever been in that situation?
My first campaign, I tried to run for a U-Lot. I was just over generous in a few aspects. I had a great idea, but my idea was, you know, I have a bunch of cats and I need to box your ass in by having, no matter which way you turn, I have an answer for you, which is not the way to DM. It's just I thought it was an interesting story. What?
It works for some.
Right. I just when you think you have the answers, I change all the questions. No, thank you, Roddy Piper. But no, yeah, I've had that one. I've had a couple other games just fall through. And there are weeks when I'm at the game shop, you know, being a DM, sometimes even with a one-shot module for it be Adventure League or Pathfinder Society, everybody just loses interest in it. It doesn't tickle their particular fancy. And well, what are we doing next week? Is, you know, kind of the attitude I get. So yeah, it happens. And I joke around it being the player's fault, but that's not true. Sometimes a story just doesn't play out the way you want it to. The ending, oh, I have this great ending. Okay, how did we get there? I have no idea. Well, let's be Thelma and Louise and just drive off this cliff together because we're going to get to that ending of that story, right? That's questionable. So it's just from my perspective of watching you, DM, Bruce, and a few other ones, especially when it comes to homebrew. Everybody has an idea of what their ending needs, or at least needs to look like to a certain degree.
I mean, that's very. I mean, that's typically where I start planning my longer games, my games that take 3 to 5 years to actually play through. I start with how or what the end of that game might look like, and I work backwards. You know, that's just kind of my method, because like I know who my big bad is. Like I know who they are. I know what they want, and I know how they need to go about getting what they want accomplished. And from that point, I work backwards. Okay, what steps do they need to take to get to what they want? And where can the players interrupt them? Because that's really where the game happens. It happens at the points where the players' characters meet or interrupt the main bad guy, or the main core moving aspect of the game. It's where the two intersect for the most part. Now I've got multiple bad guys or multiple villains, so to say, moving in the shadows and moving along the backstage trying to all do their own goals. Some of them might align, some of them might not. And week to week, the players will run across some of those movers, plans or some of the things that those villains have set up trying to accomplish their goal. And the players would be like, "Oh, well, what's this?" I'm like, "I don't know. What is it? What do you want to do with it?" And that's where they're like, "Oh, this guy is trying to accomplish this thing. Let's either help them or hurt them, whatever the case might be." And then, the next week it might be, one of the other, background characters that are moving that the players trip on.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's get into these questions because, well, I work really, really hard on them. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more. Um, what are some of the specific issues or problems encountered during the game session when these games, hit the wall? I will start with More Harkman. What are some of the issues you find happening when the game is about ready to tilt?
Well, I mean, when someone is carefully crafting a bespoke story, writer's block will kill them, or kill the story anyways. Because oh, we're going to do a session every week, and then the GM is like, I don't have a good idea. I'll look at this tomorrow, and then suddenly tomorrow is game night, and oh wait, I haven't done it yet.
I've seen that happening.
But that's kind of like the thing I mentioned earlier. In the back when I was doing Foundry stuff for Star Trek Online, which, okay, technically it's not GMing, it's more like module writing, but one of the first ones I started working on, I never finished that series because the fact that I just couldn't figure out how I wanted the second part of the story to play out in the middle. It's like I had an end point, but I just couldn't figure out how to get from the midpoint to the end point.
All right. Yeah, I can see that. What about you, Jade? What are some of the issues?
Oh, go ahead.
What are some of the specific issues or problems you've encountered when you have a game that just putters out?
So, yeah, so I'm going to speak to one about, I want to say 6-7 years ago. I was running the game that takes place about 10 years after one of my other games ended, in world timeline. So the players' characters know that there was this huge combat or conflict out in the middle of nowhere. And it kind of redefined things in the world. Then wars were fought for this new thing. And what the game basically took them from their home world to a parallel world. And when they finally they were around like level 15 to 20. The game was already starting to fall apart because players either were disinterested or moving on to other things, or the things were just starting to fall apart. But for me as the game master, I had an idea of where I was trying to get to the players to get to or to find and discover, but I guess I hadn't put either the right clues, hints, or the right information in place for them to discover it. And then some of the players didn't even ask, for the information. They just made the assumption of what they were supposed to be doing, which, I went along with. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that. And the game started going off the rails right around the time the player who was playing the paladin raised their weapon to a person who had thrown down their weapon and surrendered. And the player took the shot anyway. So I'm like, okay, well, you are now a fighter without feet. Congratulations. You feel the power leave you. And then the very next week, the game was over. Like nobody was available to come back to the table. So, I didn't have the ability to start a redemption arc for that character for, basically killing a enemy combatant who had given up. Because instead of interrogating that enemy for for intel on the enemy force movement, they're like, nope, I'm just gonna kill him, move on. And I probably did a lot of things wrong with that game because, like I said, it takes place in a game world that is old to me. I know that game world probably better than any other written content, and almost none of it is written down. So, and I may have forgotten to put in different, the right information. I'm seeing chat here. Scott, yes, it is the one you remember, and I don't know how you're remembering it, but that was the only time I ran that game, and I have not had the ability to or want to rerun that game and rerun that concept. Not yet, at least. There's other things I want to do before I get back to that one.
I remember sitting at a table, me, gentleman named Todd. You were the DM, and it was the after effect of the heroes winning, where there was a war. We were in a different universe because a person could not tell which one was what, and there was like only one paladin in the party, and that was Todd, and he blew himself up. He killed himself by shooting a Baylor in the back of the head with some other dumbass. Boondock style.
I think it was after you left the area.
Did you try to run that again?
No. Maybe I did. Maybe I did run it twice and it just fell apart twice. I can't remember.
I would love to get back to that game. I'm back in town. My Tuesdays are free. Unless me and Kai are able to go to Washington, because I got that in the workings as well. No, I get that. I truly do get that. How that works out. Mine issues when it comes to this question. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to address chat here. So, I think you've even got him starred. L states, if you play in the end of the game, you fail as a game master. Yes, to a point. If I don't have a compass heading for my game, I am lost as a game master, and my game falls apart within 3 sessions. So that's why I point towards my end, my goal as the game master. That's my goal, is like, what is my villain? What are they doing? What do they want to accomplish? That's my goal. So I think that's where I may have misspoke. So yeah. I just wanted to address that one. I give my players the freedom to actually go do other things, and if they don't deal with that threat by the end of that campaign, well, then that enemy succeeds in their plan, whatever it might be. Could be world destruction, could be world peace through forced subjugation. I don't know.
When I'm writing a campaign or building a campaign, we'll get to hex crawls on a different a chat night there, L. Going back to what Elle said about losing, I build my campaign like I build a house. The back, how it's posted in, is me laying down the cement, because that is the ending. If the players don't go that route, that's fine, but this is how the world's going to pop. They have the choice either to figure it out or not figure it out. It is, bedstone, using a Minecraft, aspect. And you just build on top of it, and hopefully the players work it out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. What about you, Mark? Do you plan for the bad guy? Do you the big bad in the beginning, or do you just push, or do you just make it? How should I put it? Or does the big bad guy just kind of show up as you're running the game?
Well, one thing that I heard years ago is a quote attributed to J. Michael Straczynski. This was in relation to his process for writing Babylon 5 and why he made a big picture set of plans for I forget exactly how many seasons of the show, but more than actually got made. Why? Because he had what he wanted to be the big grand ending point. And we never got to see that because it didn't go that far. But be that as it is, he started with that because of the fact that if you don't know where you want to go, well, you're going to kind of tend to drift aimlessly. And he wrote the series that way because of the fact that it's like, yes, the filler stuff in the middle. It's like there's the big story beats, and then you have this other stuff that also happened. And it's not necessarily unimportant, but it's not the big framework part of the story. It's the bricks that fit in between the walls or whatever. And I try to take that approach to writing stories. But like I mentioned with that one story that I just never finished, I started writing it, and I actually kind of sort of put into the first part of the story how you were going to defeat the bad guy. It's just that I set it up so that you had to do a whole bunch of things in order to get there, and only actually got halfway there. But I started by deciding what I wanted to be the end point of the story, which in that case was using a time bomb. And when I say time bomb, I mean in the time portal sense, to blow up a temporal shield in the past so that it won't protect the location you're attacking from time travelers that are currently in the present. Because, yeah, this was a temporal paradox story. And the whole thing with this story was to resolve the temporal paradox by destroying the equipment the bad guys were using to create the temporal paradox. And then after you do that, the time cops can just, come in and clean up everything. But the time cops need you to blow the thing up first. And again, it was like a Star Trek thing. So, but
sounds very Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah. But I started with the idea that the ending point of the story would be you blowing up the temporal shield generator. I just never figured out how to set up the bad guy base for you to actually wander around through the bad guy base till you got to there. I had a bunch of ideas because of the nature of the bad guy I chose for this that I just could not figure out how to make work. Oh well.
Well, there was another one I starred from Bo. I keep the world spinning. If I don't know what the player wants, how can I know how to end it? Wait, how can I know how to end it if I don't know what? Basically, how can I end if I don't know what the players want?
Let me. I keep the world spinning. If I don't know, can you go ahead and put this on screen?
Yeah.
I don't know what the players want. How can I keep, or how can I know how to answer? Oh, okay.
I think what Bo is trying to say here is that if you are letting the players determine the course you are taking, then you can't start by knowing the end point because you're not the one who's actually in control of the direction you're going. Or something like that.
Yeah. And that's, how do I want to answer this? Or how do I want to respond to this? So part of the opening of my game, like before my game gets rolling, before everyone starts rolling up dice and considering character concepts and stories of their characters, I have a villain. I got like 5 or 6 villains, and then multiple different arcs based on if those villains succeed or fail in their plans. And then I go around the table, at my session 0, and I collect, what do you, the player, want to see your character accomplish? What is their life goal? And once I've acquired, and typically it's done in the form of a short story about the character, a background story. So they might include some of their wants, their desires as characters for the game, and I'm going to take those ideas from the players that they feed to me, and I'm going to somehow tie their goals with my main villains, my moving pieces in the background, and I will alter my villains to a point to be more in alignment with what the character goal is. If a player has given me like, oh yeah, my entire village was torched and everyone slaughtered to the man while my character was away doing whatever. I'm like, okay, if they know who that villain was, or if they don't know who that villain was, well, now I know that there's a villain out there that torched an entire town. Which villain do I want it to be? And I just pick one of my villains, like, oh, that would suit this villain's purpose because there was something there that they wanted. So, my players have the power to change the game to suit them and to suit their goals if I know what their goals are to begin with. And I think that's one of the big things that as a game master that I always will try to do is I want to know what my players want. And I'm in a game right now that we're in a completely different world than the one we started in. And my character's goals are gone. Like my character has no goals other than one, to get home or get home back to his family again and fulfill his duty in protecting the charge that he was given. Because he's a paladin, he's escorting a priest of his order in this other world. His goal is to get her home and to get himself home. Everything else is secondary to that. But that's his only goal right now.
Trying to find the right way to answer this. Not gonna complain about not getting enough sleep, at least not to you. The idea for some of these campaigns that we run, these games that we play, is to be adventure. We have players that want to be heroes, the big damn heroes, to be the adventurers. I'm not talking about murder hobos. I'm talking about going out there and finding the danger and helping the town, saving the world from whatever. I mean, that's why there are thousands and thousands of stories about the big damn hero and his crew, from everywhere from knights to pirates to everything in between. So I think in my point of view is, if I can come up with a villain who has henchmen or whatever that would drive the party to want to continue coming back each week to put said person down to stop the evilness from spreading, then I think it's beneficial for me to have a big bad that's worth their time. That's why I put time in it before I start the game of, okay, is this going to be a Hannibal Lecter? Is this going to be what kind of villain am I making? What is his things? Is this an ancient evil that's been asleep for thousands of years that's been woken up? Is this somebody new that's trying to make a move on the world stage? And if the players if the players decide that they don't want anything to do with this, there's going to be consequences. Sometimes good, most times bad. It's something a DM, in my opinion, needs to keep in the back of his head is every action that the players make has consequences. Sometimes for the good, most of the time kind of for the bad. Jade has this wonderful story about a group that killed a kingdom full of the undead and a king lich. And I'll let him tell the story at a later date. But their consequences of their actions are not what you think that they are because they did not read the sign. They did not understand what's going on. They just piled through. So having them understand what's on stake or what's going on by having a big bad make his first move, maybe not his big bad lieutenant, making some kind of move at the beginning of the game is important. It's about setup. It's about telling, yes, I'm going to use this word, a story. Because we're not sitting at a table, rolling dice. Well, most of us are not rolling dice and say, well, my number's bigger. No, we're trying to get involved in the story. We're trying to make our character part of the world that the DM is running. And that's why I spend time on the big bad in the very beginning of the game. That's a little bit more preachy than I like to get to. So I will move on. All right. Second question. Were your players during this time were having fun until it fell off the tracks? Were they engaged? Were they having fun in the campaign? I'll start with you, Jade.
I was getting ready to respond in the chat.
Which one?
No, it's fine. I think others are responding to it. So your question to me was
number 2.
If my players were engaged and having fun. So in my the example I've given, the Two Worlds One Home game, I think my players were engaged at the beginning. I think I did a few things that were right and good, but I think somewhere around the middle is where I lost my players. They didn't really know where they were supposed to be going and what they were supposed to be doing. And I'd kind of left it as a quasi sandbox where they could go just about anywhere they wanted after a certain point. And, I'd given them information like, well, okay, here's what's out this direction. Here's what is out that direction. You can go back to where you came from and say you've made contact with whatever, because they were sent from where their main base was, which was an island nation, out into the world to see if there were other survivors, other outposts that were still fighting back against the world invaders. And all they had to do was go make contact, form, get an alliance going, and come back home with alliance members to start forming a unified resistance against the world invaders. Like that was the concept of the game was, in this parallel universe, the great heroes from 10 years past lost, and it opened up the gateways of hell and the abyss to start pouring forth into the world and wreaking havoc. And most of the nations were so divided that they couldn't present a unified front at the time. So they all fell divided. So the player's goal was to get all of those nations, the remnants thereof, into one pact, one alliance. And there was a lot of really great role play opportunity that I don't think I got to or didn't put in the player's way, which is why I think I lost my player engagement to basically this quagmire of a story or a plot. because I mean, I even lost focus of like, where are we going? What are we doing? And why are we doing it? Like when I have lost that focus, I can't expect my players to have that focus. And that's, I think, what truly happens. We lost focus on what the goal was.
I need to respond to something in chat. L
Sure.
and everybody else, I appreciate the back and forth, but if I'm reading L's last statement correctly, that will not happening on this show unless I'm reading it wrong.
I don't know what chat's doing. Hold on.
Kai is an idiot thinking his imagination was better than everybody else's.
I'm not sure if L was the victim of autocorrect or not, but Schooner Zone. Right. Writing stories about schooners, that's been done several times.
I think the back and forth was about Gygax specifically.
I just no name calling. People, please keep it civil. I like freedom of speech, but don't be an ass. At least not warranted ass.
So, okay. Yeah, keep don't resort to personal attacks in the chat, please. And that goes either direction. We're all here as gamers. Let's be friendly toward one another. If you have differences of opinion with someone, you can have those different opinion. I'm not saying you can't, but at least be civil about it, please. So anyway, Mar, I think the question is to you. In the games that you've had that, sorry if I'm taking over here, Connell. I'm just trying to get the things going. In the games that you've had where things have fallen apart or hit a brick wall, were the players engaged with the game or not?
Well, that one example actually had very good player engagement. It's just that the players were genuinely liked the story that the DM was telling. It's just that he ran out of story. That didn't work out. They just took an indefinite hiatus and never went back to it. And this is one of those things where there's a certain aspect of playing games like this where I understand why random tables exist. It's like you as the person creating the story, you put in the big story beats. Like, okay, you guys go that way, walk through 20 miles of dense forest until you get to the hidden Black Castle, and then fight the Lich Lord hiding inside the Black Castle. Yeah, okay, sure. And you're not going to do a bespoke map of the entire 20 miles of forest. Doing random encounter tables and stuff for when the players are wandering through the forest. That just makes sense. It's efficient game design. But that said, it does kind of sort of feel when you're doing that, like you need to carefully make it so that it stays with the topic and doesn't just go off the rails too, because it goes back to that whole Diablo 2 thing I mentioned earlier, where you don't go full random. You have a list of options that makes sense for the general direction the story is going in, and you don't say it's like, oh, you enter a small clearing. In the middle of the clearing there's a giant magma worm. Have fun with that. That doesn't make sense. So it isn't something that you would want to put in the story as a randomization option. So just leave it out of the random option pool.
I completely agree. Depending on what he was saying, if I'm doing a random in the past, I've written in notebooks. If they're like in a dungeon or whatever, I will come up with X amount of monsters that are appropriate to that area, and I'll number them one through how many I ever have, and I'll use 2d10s, and that's what's going to pop up there. But they're going to be appropriate to this scenario where they're at. And what was your original question there, Jade? I'm sorry.
So I mean, it was so when the game fell apart on you, like, were your players engaged, and if not, like, why do you believe that your players weren't engaged? What do you think you could have done differently?
I got two ways to answer this. Really, three. Okay, when I'm running out of shop and I have a bunch of kids and they lose interest, kids just lose interest. There's just absolutely, unless you find a hook to drag them back in, it's playing smack 'em mole. And so I just kind of let the evening just pace out however it pace out as children, because they're here to have fun. And I'm not going to be that hard-nosed DM, hard-nosed teacher, because that's what they deal with at school, saying, no, you have to sit still, no, you have to do your work. That does not make this game fun, especially for kids. So I'm a little bit more easier on kids. When it comes to adults, it just happens. I mean, the guy that you had in your campaign that loses his paladin power because he did something stupid. I mean, that shit happens. I mean, the guy's like, that's bullshit. It should have went this way. Here are the rule mechanics. Hey, Larry, you're the rule lawyer. Fill in the dots where I'm missing, and that will happen. Or, you know what? It's Friday night. Football season just started. Sorry, guy. I'm sorry. It's Friday night and baseball season has just started. Or hockey. Or
whatever, sports ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, and I get that. This is not a job. The only person at the table getting paid, at least from that situation, is me. And they're just here to have fun. If they think they can have a better chance somewhere else having fun, more power to them. So going back to the questions, these are really good questions. I'm so glad I wrote them down. We're on number 3. Did the game story or plot lack depth or excitement? And I'm going to say this really quick on Jade's behalf. The campaign he's talking about, one world, two whatever his title for it.
One world, two home, or two worlds, one home. Yeah.
One home. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was entertaining. I was fully invested in the campaign. I know my ex-wife was fully invested because me and her would talk about it afterwards. I think Robert was as well. Todd always has something else to do. It's just that's how he is. It's not a bad thing. Todd's just a busy person. I think your table, from my point of view, was me and Tronda were moving away to Eastern. You were on your way to get married, and the game was at my house. So there was only one way for that game to end. So, but
in a perpetual to be continued,
right? Which I'm very much trying to find that channel again. I'm clicking. I just haven't got there yet.
It got canceled after season 1. Just like Firefly.
Oh, see, that's just not nice. Damn you, Fox. Shitting the bed again. All right. So, do you think your games were entertaining, exciting, kept people on their seats? Jade?
Oh, Well, I like to think so. I mean, I've had several players over the years come back to me and be like, "Hey, remember that game that you ran that X, Y, and Z happened?" I mean, you're a prime example of that. But I've had other players as well come back and like, "Man, I would really love to know what would happen next. If we ever got that group back together." So I want to say yes. My tables are, or my game's story, my game world's story is exciting. I have to say it definitely has depth. That one I can absolutely say yes. My game world has depth to it. And if I had players who were willing to stick around for the 20 years it's been running, they would know the entire depth of the world as much as I know it. Because again, it's a game that it's a game world, not one game, but multiple different games within the same world or setting that have been told at multiple different tables for multiple different groups. And it's a living world. We always keep moving the clock forward every time we run a new game. This next game I want to run in that same world is the first time we're taking the hands of the clock and we're spinning it backwards to 14,000 or more years into the past. Because every game we've run in that world, my buddy Reese and I, it's always been the prime timeline, which has been roughly a medieval-ish, medieval fantasy era. It's about where we typically run it, but I've run a more modern game in it, using tech from around our timeline of World War One, the Great War, of like firearms and locomotive mechanics and even self-driving vehicles. But again, like I said, we've always moved the clock forward, never backward. And this next one, I'm gonna be doing that. I'm gonna break that mold, and I'm gonna move the hands of that clock so far back to the absolute beginning of the grand story that's happened. Because I want to know. I want to know what my players are going to do and what changes that will affect the world going forward. Because we've told the stories that have happened, in the more modern times. We've never explored what happened in the distant past. We have ideas of what happened in the distant past, but we never explored those ideas. And then that's where I want to go. That's gonna be the next game.
I know the show is called Gatekeeper, but once he gets that game up and going, there will be some gate crashing, at least on my part. What about you, Mark? Your campaigns, are they fun? Do you play with your family? Does everybody have a good time?
Yeah, as a general rules, yeah. It's like one of the things with the family game though is that part of the reason why it took so long was actually that we tended to screw around more than getting things done. So a module that in theory should take approximately 3 hours to play, we'd be at it for 12 or more hours because we're not actually spending most of the time playing. It's one of those like family get together, hang out things where you hang out more than anything else.
Sounds like Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's awesome. I don't come from a family like that. Extremely jealous. I would love to have that situation, but truly do understand that. I think of this game as what it is. At least 1/4% of it is a social hour because we're hanging out with people that we haven't seen for a week. And a lot of things have happened within a week, and it's a really quick. It's a really good chance to just catch up. And sometimes that catching up just takes longer than is supposed to, or happens in just bad timing awards. Hey guys, I'm needing you to concentrate. I'm sorry, but did you hear Timmy? Just his oldest son just got married. It's real life stuff that we bring with us to the table. I might be wrong, but that's how I've always looked at it. Do people have fun at my games? Are they? I think so. They keep paying me to run, so I'm gonna take that as a yes. That's a W in my column. Um. And stories. Yeah. No. Number three. I'm looking at the stories plot. I'm running a module. I mean, all the plot work is there. I just have to run it correctly. In theory. When you're running your games, are the rules understood? Does everybody understand the rules of the game? Do they, it being a D20, it being a D6 system, two D10s, no dice, some dice, all of the dice? But do you think the part of the reason that the party did not last was because of not knowing the rules? I'll start with you, Jade.
Oh, again, okay. So and I used to be a stickler on the rules, and in a way, I kind of am still a rules lawyer. So when my players didn't understand the rule of the from the books, I used to run just raw, rules as written, not necessarily as interpreted or rules as intended. I would always go rules as written. And when players didn't understand, I would stop the game and explain the rule. I have since stopped doing that because I learned, from that, like that takes time away from the actual fun of the game. And, I, as much as I used to rules lawyer and get rules lawyered back on particular rules that I just wasn't well versed on, like I don't pay attention to the grapple rules. I never have. I never will because I just don't care. I'm never going to get into grappling combat because it's like it's just not something I find fun, engaging, or interesting. Because I do actual grappling, or I used to do actual grappling in judo. Like that was my sport of choice, was judo. Used to be soccer, then it became judo. And I can speak about grappling from that concept and that aspect, and the rules of D&D just are absolute trash to how an actual grappling fight goes. Like there is no way that the rules can cover all the nuances that happen in an actual grappling fight like that. Having been in them, and it's vastly different. And so I've never paid attention to the rules for grappling. I will never use the rules for grappling because they're utter garbage to me. Because real life experience. So as far as the game breaking down because players didn't understand the rules, I think it's not that the game breaks down because players don't understand the rules. It's the game breaks down because the players either not necessarily not understand the rules, but the rules lawyers at the table make it unfun. Now, I'm not saying that rules lawyers are the problem players. Because some of them who know the rules really well and know how the game mechanics are supposed to work, they're godsend sometimes. Because while the game master is doing their thing, a player might have a question. And the rules lawyers, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, and it works like this. As long as they don't go too in depth and kill the mood, it's fine. But I would say that overly rules lawyering is what kills the mood at the table more so than players not knowing the rules.
Well, I would caveat that with it's when the person who is being the rules lawyer is being combative about it. That's the really big one. Because like people being like, oh yeah, that rule, it's on this page and it says that. That's usually not going to kill the mood. It's the other thing that's a problem, I guess you'd say.
No, I agree. I think it depends on how is it brought. How is the rule getting brought up? For a perfect example, in Bruce's campaign when he was playing here in Washington, there I was playing a character that threw weapons. That was his bag. He just threw whatever he can get his hands on. And because Pathfinder allowed me through a feat to basically pick up anything and throw it, I would. And the question got brought up is like, well, if you're throwing an axe, the rule lawyer at the table said, well, he should have to do a percentage roll to see what end of the axe actually hits the person when I throw it. And my normal response as a DM and very much that situation is the DM can step on my toes when it comes to mechanics like this. You as a player, there's no need to. This is his game, his job. If he says yes, then everything is copacetic.
That's one of those weird nitpicky things where you just look at it, scratch your head, and you're like, okay, so you want to do a percentile roll to see which part of the axe hits the target when it hits. Fine, okay. Well, that sounds like a good idea. The damage chart, all it has is a flat damage amount, and we don't actually have different tables of damage for pointy end versus blunt end. So we're not
Granted,
doing
I
that.
have seen memes when you don't have dex, but you have strength, it still goes through.
I totally get that. Honestly, I mean, there's actually a meme I saw a while back of like this guy's like, "Oh, I don't have the dexterity required to wield swords. Fine, I'll just throw 100-pound boulders at the enemy instead."
I think with playing Pathfinder in 5e now, most of the people who want to play 5e tend to want to know most of the basic rules set for the very small nitpicky aspect of the game. Pathfinder another version of 3.5, and as Scott said earlier, there was the 3.5 had a lot. Here it is. D&D 3.5 was fairly complex system. There was a lot of
Caveats, yeah.
caveats.
Yeah, there are a lot of caveats in that game.
And sometimes sometimes you as the DM, just need to make hard rules. Jade with his grappling, me with if I got a feat or whatever saying it works this way, then don't step on my dick. There's no reason for it. And so that's my opinion on handling that. Different opinions might be, different. I want to bounce up to before we get into the next question. I had one
Make
start.
rulings, not rules.
Yeah, I want to answer this one really quick. Head at Star. Um, I have quite literally a library of different modules going back for the last 10 years of one shots. I have one module that I run, and that is for a different group. But when it comes to the store, I have hundreds. I have a library, like I said, of different one shot modules. I just run the players through. No, I do not overlap. I overlap lap. If I do one game though that everybody freaking likes, there's a game of Pathfinder Anxiety where in the middle of it you end up driving mechs, which everybody loves. Everybody loves this one, and I'll put that on a different pile, saying, depending on the group, I might just run this one again. I know the older players are not going to say anything, but if you come in with a Gundam shirt on, 10-1, I'm grabbing that module and running the party through it. And the older players who actually come around will still enjoy it. It's one of the more popular one-shot modules I've ever ran, and it's so.
Thinking about various games I've played that involve piloting mechs.
Yes.
Even games where that's not something you normally do, it was fun for the novelty factor alone. I can think of two examples here. Granted, these are computer games or something along those lines. Like Final Fantasy V, there's a sequence at the beginning where you have a team that's not characters you play in the main story, who are, mech pilots wandering around and, subjugating people in the name of the evil empire. And then your mechs get disabled, and then the main story starts. And another one is Champions Online, which MMO, superhero themed. There is, however, in the game a story where you take control of a giant robot and go stomp an army of bad guys with a giant robot. Because why not?
Exactly. Why not? We're on number 5.
Oh, okay.
Did you, as the game master / GM, provide adequate guidance and support to your players? Boy, I didn't know I knew how to spell adequate. So did you offer guidance adequately to as you're running your campaign there, Jade?
Starting with me again. Okay.
I have to work his questions a little bit differently than I do yours.
Oh, sure. So as the game master, did I provide adequate guidance? I'm gonna say for the one that failed, I'm gonna say no. I probably didn't. Because the players, and actually I've just been talking with Scott on a separate channel. It was relayed to me that his character didn't know where he was going and what he was doing anymore. Like the game kind of became this quagmire of nothingness, of just bog, and no one really knew what they were supposed to be doing or what they needed or what needed to happen next. So I'm going to say no. I didn't provide enough meat or hook for the players to suss out where to go next. And that's probably because me as the game master didn't understand where the game needed to go next. I think when I think back to my games that have failed, because it hasn't been just one or two, it's been a few of them that have failed like this. It's because I either didn't put enough time into into my concepts, into my my enemy forces movements, or something had happened that I just wasn't prepared for mentally to be able to do those gymnastics to assess, okay, this has now just happened. Where do I go from here? And sometimes doing those mental gymnastics for me on the spot are very difficult, because typically my games take place the same day as a full day of work. And I'm not saying the work I do is laborious. It's really not. It is mentally taxing at times. So my mental gymnastic limit is mostly spent while I'm on the job. So when my players do out of the box, craziness, I get lost, and I'm like, okay, how do I handle this? And I have to stop, and I have to think, and I have to take notes and come back to it the next week. But if that happens at the beginning of a session, what do I do? Like, that's happened to me multiple times where, players gone like, oh yeah, I know last week we were doing this, and, we did the recap and everything, but I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, but that's where we left off. Like, you guys knew this whole next week, like, this is what you guys were planning to do. This is what I prepared for. Well, what do you mean you don't want to do this now? So, having those moments as well just kind of, threw me down a railroad track with a B train, coming head on, and I wasn't prepared for the mental gymnastics to get out of the way. So,
all right, Mark, How is that question? Do you have an answer for this question, or would you like me to reword it? Would actually apply a little bit more to your situation?
Well, I'll just restate the question, and I'll maybe answer something adjacent to the question.
Okay. No, I'm just trying to be nice. Did you, as the game master, provide adequate guidance and support to the players when why the game was going before it failed, or not?
Well, I mean, games I've seen fail, like I says, I'm not someone who's actually like GM'd long campaigns. That's not something I've personally done. So having a campaign just fail isn't something I've actually been the GM side of. But that example I gave earlier of the guy who made his like Minecraft inspired world and uh, using 5e. Uh, what was the question again? Sorry, I distracted myself.
Um, the question is if you as the game master provided everything the players needed to be successful while they were on their path.
Well, in that particular one, part of his issue with the game was that the players were being too successful. Like he's like, oh hey, here's a boss monster for you to fight, and all of the players are like, okay, I used my biggest spell. Okay, roll damage. Oh, the monster died. Well, that was anticlimactic. I mean, like, I'm playing a cleric who is a forge cleric and likes to smash things with a rather large hammer, which
for extra fun.
That's all I need to kill regular enemies. I don't need to use spells to kill the trash mobs kind of enemies. So all of the actual damaging spells I have get saved for when there's a boss fight, and then oh hey look, here's the a fireball that I've been waiting to cast for the entire session. Boom.
Well, that's not guidance, but that does lead into the next question or a question down the list I have. Go for it, Jade.
So I do have something to caveat off this. So one of the other things I was notoriously awful at, and I'm saying I was awful for doing this. I would lock specific and much needed information behind skill checks in 3.5. I learned to not do this because my players got absolutely frustrated with me. Like, well, if none of us can make the check, why the fuck are we here? Why did any of us come out here if we knew we couldn't do it?
Oh, that reminds me
I had to do some really hard thinking and scale back. Like, oh, I should not be locking my much needed information behind skill checks, because skill checks can fail. If players are searching for the information they need to move the quest along, they should be able to find it. It shouldn't be a skill check. Now, if you're going to put something behind a skill check, like, for them to glean information from, it should be something that's extra, that's beyond what is necessary. They find what's necessary. And if they make a skill check that, goes beyond whatever you set as the target number, like, oh, okay, so not only do you find the information to move your quest along, but you get a little something extra. You might glean a reason as to why X, Y, and Z is doing A, B, and C in M or an LMN area. So yeah, go for it, Mar.
What I was going to say is actually directly adjacent to that, because one of the things that the guy who did that Minecraft thing had issues with was trying to come up with non-combat things for the players to do that we wouldn't be just like, okay, I smashed the door. Here are two things that I personally remember because of the fact that reaction to both of them was exactly the same because of the fact that I was genre savvy, and it's like, oh, this is an obvious trap. And my character had the ability, was a forge cleric, and lighting things on fire was just something she did. So he's like, okay, this door is obviously made out of pure evil and thus needs to be incinerated. Like, yeah, but and so the DM's like, yeah, the door is protected by a magical barrier that fire can't penetrate. Yeah, and then we had to do this complicated puzzle sort of thing to figure out how to bypass the magical barrier.
That sounds familiar.
And then in a later thing, we walk into a small room with a treasure chest just sitting in the middle of the floor. And I'm like, yep, this is an obvious trap. Burn. And that was, again, the other members of the party are like, no, don't do that. There might be loot in it. And I'm like, sure. You want to open the treasure chest? Fine, we can open the treasure chest. The way he described the room, there weren't any other doors in the room. Part of the reason why I was so suspicious is because my thought on this is like, okay, so this world is made using Minecraft logic, and Minecraft logic includes collapsible floors, and collapsible floors in Minecraft can be triggered by opening a treasure chest.
I mean, it's not wrong.
And that's exactly what he did.
I personally, I like steps that have a weight on it that launches fireball and there's just no way around it. Because in a one breast hallway, one at a time, or lightning bolt. Lightning bolts also are really awesome too. You step on it. I have reflex save. Go for it. But what wall are you bouncing off of?
In one of the Hyperborea games I was in, we nearly had a TPK because someone pissed off the boss and aggroed the boss before we entered the boss room. So the boss fires a lightning bolt at us down the hallway that's leading into the room he was in, with everyone lined up in a row.
I like physical tables.
The only reason that it wasn't a TPK is because there's a statue in the middle of the hallway that we had to walk around to get to the door. And the ruling was that two people got hit. Then the statue took the brunt of the lightning blast.
Spiral staircase built by gnomes, meant for lightweight individuals to be going up. First time an orc charges up the stairs, gets to the top stair, doesn't realize the top stair has, or actually I think it's the second one from the top, has a loose board on it that is sitting on top of dust of dryness pellets that are filled with hundreds of gallons of water. Suddenly, that one orc that was charging up with an army behind him is alone because he just washed his entire army away with 10,000 or more gallons of water.
That reminds me of one of the variations of a floor trap that I've seen, though, is a circular staircase that's a retractable staircase. It's like it's just a circular pit when the staircase is retracted with nothing to climb on. And while the staircase is out, you could just walk up. When the staircase retracts, good luck. I
went to a state sale last week, and this old lady was selling her son's gaming habits, gaming stuff. And speaking of traps, one of the things I picked up was Grimm's Tooth Traps Light, and nice. These things are just nightmare fuel.
Those things are diabolical.
Yeah, and
that book is just diabolical.
I've been enjoying that book, and 30 days of world building for your campaign needs.
Lady,
Oh, nice.
I've seen the Goonies organ trap in action at least 12 times. And even after watching it 12 times, I scratch my head and wonder what kind of dark magic was used to construct that thing, because there is no way in hell you could actually build that with real world conventional tools.
You talking about the piano?
The organ
Mhm.
trap, where it's
Yeah, yeah.
it's an organ made out of bones in a cave, and playing it wrong causes parts of the cave floor to collapse.
My biggest laugh in the Goonies, and we're gonna get back to it here in a second. Was, hey, stick your hand in this hole. No, you stick your own hand in that hole. Anyways, but I just think that's funny when it comes to traps. Like, hey, somebody needs to stick their hand in this hole. Sounds like you just volunteered, buddy.
I've seen that done several different ways with different results, and it's always a tense moment before you find out what the result's going to be, because you genuinely, unless you've seen that specific use of it before, you really don't know what's going to happen.
It's taking anything. I worked at factories, and they have signs on the wall saying, if you won't stick one thing in it, don't stick your finger in it. So that's just my lifelong
Yep.
philosophy. Anyways, moving on.
Moving along.
I know that we just did 5, but because of the balance issue that guy's DM was having, I'm going to switch a pop down to 7 really quick, because balance issues can be a part of the problem. I think. Were there balance issues with the characters, encounters, or the challenges, and I'm going to add on to that one, or the items that they had? I'll start with you, Mark. Do you think the lack of balance in this campaign, that the players versus it should be the player versus the monsters, this just was not enough balance to keep the game solid? Do you think that could have been an issue?
Well, this is actually one of those things where I have mentioned on multiple occasions that I'm fine with the GM fudging the HP of monsters, simply because of the fact that as a GM, your purpose is to see to it that the story plays out smoothly. If you are trying to make a boss fight that, at least lasts a few rounds, and the enemies have done X amount of damage to the boss before the boss has even gotten a chance to attack, I wouldn't personally consider it cheating to just be like, oh, okay, you did 24 damage, cool, all right, now it's time for the boss to take his action, when in reality the boss is at minus 10 hit points already, even though the boss hasn't gotten to move yet. Because again, that's part of the issue we had with the Minecraft thing, is that we were making the enemies explode really, really good, and that, well, it just sidestepped all of his scenario design efforts, is that he wasn't willing to fudge the numbers to. So you're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, the boss isn't dead yet, okay, now he's going to do, he would just like, oh, you killed it already, well, never mind. And then just like, okay, the boss is dead, now what? Sort of thing. It's like, you don't have to do that, right? Because as the person who's running the game, you have a certain idea as to how deadly you want the game to be, and how easy you want it to be for the players to beat up all of the paper targets you put in front of them. And you don't have a reason to tell them how many hit points any of the enemies actually has. So if they don't know, until the enemy dies, it doesn't actually matter how many hit points you put on the character sheet for that enemy.
I wanted to start with this one because there's a couple good ones. Oh no! I just throw more and more powerful things at them. Okay. Yeah, I know that logic.
Yeah, I mean that is actually kind of sort of one of the things that a particular guy could have done. I mean, one thing that I personally would love to do if I was to make a monster manual is to, in a game where the player levels go from 1 to 20, make level 1 to 20 versions of all of the monsters. Not necessarily with like a big old table method, but maybe a more condensed version. Like this is how many of this, and this the monster gets per level, that sort of thing. Because scaling monsters thematically works very well. It's the whole like physical, like, okay, what are the monster's actual stats if you scaled a ordinary goblin up to level 8? What actual stats would that actually have? Because something that's designed as a level 1 enemy is going to have spitball damage and no hit points if it fighting a level 8 player. Level 8 player is just going to bonk it with a mace and move on.
All right.
But
okay.
if you actually had a system where the monsters in the monster manual scaled like that, that would let you as a DM just like, okay, we're going to use this level version of the monster. When a lot of player DMs will actually just kind of sort of take like several similar things and just like kind of sort of like take a hobgoblin or an orc and then just like, okay, we're just going to pretend this is a regular goblin and use the stats for the bigger monster instead. But it kind of works.
I know what you're going to say there, Jade, about not worshiping false gods, but you have to admit there's been times in campaigns where you spent X amount of time on a counter and one roll of a dice or whatever, and well, if I can't, it doesn't matter what I roll, I can't see him. That's not balanced at all. Let me chuck this book across the room. No, Jade never's done that at all. Um, has balance ever been an issue? It being a false god to kill one of your campaigns?
So, when I was more rules centric and rules focused, or rules as written focused, yeah, the balance of the game was a factor in a lot of ways. So when I was running 3.5, after about level 15, some of the mechanics started breaking. There were certain aspects of the game that just didn't work. As a matter of fact, there was an entire book of monsters that were not appropriately designed for the level of players they were meant to go up against. And that's not just a 3.5 thing. That's almost every game out there has those little mechanical breakdowns or cracks in the system that allow things to squeak through that probably shouldn't. And it's on us as game masters to recognize what those cracks are and either fix them, fill them in, or patch them over in some capacity to allow for players to do those things, but also to have an answer or counter available to react to what the players do. Did I get upset when when one particular player one shot the final boss of an area? Yeah, I got a little upset, or at least I used to. Now I'm just like, okay, whatever. There's bigger fish. That's fine. Let's move on. So don't get upset at the players for figuring out how to one shot monsters. Change the game a little bit. Change the monsters up. You've got 3 main dials as a game master that you can spin up or down to 11. That's the danger. I'm sorry. That's the amount of damage that's going out. That's the let's see where the other D's. The ability to disrupt your players' actions and the duration of things in the combat area. So exploring those three. So damage. It's very easy to turn the dial for damage up to 11. This thing's swinging harder suddenly. He goes from a one-handed grip on his great club to a two-handed grip, and suddenly he's doing a lot more damage. Awesome. Okay, well, what about duration? Okay, so the mage is going to affect the area with a spell that's going to linger for a long period of time, or could even be a dragon's breath that fills the cave with no ambient air pressure to move that smoke out. So now you've got to suffer through smoke inhalation while trying to fight a dragon who doesn't care. Or you go into the disruption phase of it, where your players are like, oh yeah, all we have to do is charge across that that bridge, and we're to the other side. We're fighting those those goblins on the other side. Well, okay, the goblins hack the bridge down before the players get there, and now the players are pressed up against a hard spar, a wall of monsters and a pit that drops them into the darkness. So disrupt your players, and if your players are doing really well, reward them for doing well. But at the same time, the monsters should have the ability to go, oh hey, that guy is one-shotting every one of our little mooks here. I'm gonna brain him with a rock from across the room to get him to either stop or tumble or stumble in some way, so I have a round of reprieve that he is not downing my minions constantly. Or put up a wall of some kind. Funnel the players in a direction away from your mobs and make it harder for them to one-shot everything down. So I mean, you have all of these tools as the game master. And it's not a question about being balanced at that point, as long as you're keeping it fair. Because I can send wave after wave after wave of mooks at my players. Even if they are one-hit mooks, like I want my players to have that moment of feeling of like the fellowship and downing goblins in one hit and moving to the next one. I want them to feel powerful, but at the same time, at the very next beat of combat, I'm going to take that power, that illusion of power away by introducing the cave troll that comes in and starts waylaying them. Where now it's not a one-hit kill. No, it's more like a 50-hit kill, and they have to work together as a team to figure out how to accomplish this goal, this task that has just now been thrust upon them, while still fighting off mooks.
Well, that army of mooks thing you mentioned is something someone told me many years ago about actually making 5e challenging. There's the whole action economy thing where you, the player, you are taking your one action for this round. If there are 10 enemies, each of those 10 enemies takes one action for this round. Oh, yeah, that means that you get one action and the enemy team gets 10.
I'm not even concerned about that. As far as action economy goes, I don't care about action economy, because some of my big monsters, they have 3 or 4 actions per round. I don't need them to have. I don't need to balance an action economy with the players. Like if my mooks are gonna typically wave attack at a player. They're not gonna have the same bonuses as the players have. So I'm not going to be rolling with a +3 advantage towards my attacks. I'm going to be rolling with probably a -1, to my attacks, unless they're attacking as a group. Then I might give them a collective bonus of +1, and I'm going to assign that group a damage amount. That group is attacking that player or that player character, and I'm not going to roll like each individual attack. I'm going to roll maybe 1 or 2 attacks at most, and those attacks represent all of those mooks. Not individual, but all of those mooks that attacked. And there might be like 5 mooks in a group. Granted, the players can probably mow down the mooks in a hurry, especially a spellcaster. Holy crap, can a spellcaster mow down mooks? Because they only have 1 hit point apiece. But those mook groups are going to be attacking individual characters and trying to separate them. Like that's part of the disruption as well, is separating out your players and breaking their party apart so that they can't get to one another easily to help one another. So in that instance, like, I'm not concerned of whether or not it's a balanced encounter. They always have the option of running away. Like, I always give my players an out. There's always the route to freedom somewhere. Sometimes they have to make their own route to freedom, but it's an option. They can still flee if they need to. And that's something I don't think a lot of players have been doing at my table lately. For the last like 20 years, many of my players just won't back down. They're like, no, we have to kill everything on the board. We have to, like, but while you've got other players going, no, we can't kill everything on the board because there's more of them coming. You don't understand. There's an army of 10,000 entering the town. We can't kill all of them. And then you've got that one player going, oh no, we can kill all of them. We're fine. We're one-man armies. Okay.
Well, it's that
Let's
war of
do it.
attrition thing. It's like kind of what I was getting at earlier is that, it's like, okay, there's even if you do it kind of like the whole like a ducks in a row thing where, like you kill 5 goblins, 5 more take their place, but like the other like 100 just aren't in attack bridge. So the other 100 have to get closer before they can actually do anything. So you're playing whack-a-mole, and eventually you're going to, even if each goblin is only able to do 1 damage to you before dying on average, eventually, if there's 100 of them, you're going to succumb from your wounds by death of 1,000 cuts, and that's game over for you.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the argument before with 100 plus 100 fighters versus 1 dragon. Eventually, the dragon is going to, give up the ghost, because if at least if they all hit 100, each of them at least hit 1 time, and as you just said, 1 point damage, that does add up.
I mean, in 3.5 you could do that, yes, but in a realistic situation, when I come across that where a player's like, yeah, I've got leadership and I've got 10,000 followers, I'm gonna order all of them to that dragon cave to attack the dragon. I'm like, okay, so once the dragon is free, pushes their, bull rushes the entire group, overruns them all. Here's what's going to happen. The dragon's going to come out of the cave. And he's going to fly around for a few rounds, going 240 feet per round or per move action. And he's going to be doing flyby breath attacks as often as possible, making sure you can't get to him.
I would just look at him when, 1,000 of, hey, I have 1,000 followers. Can they collapse the cave? What do you mean? Can they, just make the door go away? But we won't kill the dragon. Yeah, but the dragon's not going to be able to get out for a while either.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually seen that in a story, though. Is that there's one story? It was dwarves. It was dwarves dealing with a dragon, and the dragon was living in the cave. The dwarves are like, you know what? Yeah, we're just going to bury the dragon in the cave, and just like did something to make the cave roof collapse. Whether it killed the dragon, I don't actually remember that part of the story, but yeah, that was the basic gist of it. It's like, why bother doing the whole like stab me to death thing? We don't need to.
I wanted to go back to this really quick. Elsa, is a TPK a wall or an end? No. And here's why, in my opinion. Because even if the entire party dies, that doesn't mean there's not cousins and nephews and brothers and all that happy horse shit out there that I need to avenge my brother / sister / wherever the hell out there. It slows down the game. I'll give you that. We'll slow down the game a little bit because I'm not going to start them at the same level as the original party. But it doesn't end the game. It takes a little bit more. It puts more time on the clock. What about you, Jade?
For me, a TPK doesn't necessarily end the game or even the ongoing story. It might be a minor road bump to everything. but there are going to be rumors of a party who got lost in the mountain pass, and that need a rescue. Guess what? The next group of heroes goes and finds the bones of the bodies of the former party. They find out what happened to them. Like that's always an option. If my players or if my characters have taken the first steps on the road to divinity, which is something I often do for some of my games, or some of the games I've run, so they're on the first steps to the road to divinity. Death might be one of the things they have to experience, and coming back from it to complete their mission. Like that might be one of the things they have to go do. They have to figure out what is death and why is it important, to the great cycle. And yeah, so in that, I've had a TPK happen where, and this is after getting a game that my wife and I really love to play. It's called The Night Cage, and had a player, or had a TPK, and the players were like, well, what do we do now? Like that happened at the beginning of the night. What do we do? Like, well, tell you what, you got your characters, have some pretty nifty stuff on them. You guys want to play a round of The Night Cage? Because I know people are not feeling great right now. Let's break out a board game. Let's play this board game and see what happens. I gave them 2 chances of playing that board game. The concept of the game is you're this character who's stuck basically in like purgatory, and you're going through these caverns with just a candle, and you're trying to get out of the night cage. Look it up; it's a great game. And I used it basically as my purgatory afterlife. And if the players were able to get out of the night cage, succeed at the game, they were allowed to come back to life in the game. So the next week we had the same characters, rising up out of the dirt, to repraise their characters, but they were all grave bound. Once they completed their mission, they went back in the ground.
I could dig that. Very Crow, one of my favorite movies / graphic novels. I can dig that. What about you, Mark? Any kind of workaround you can figure you came across?
Well, one of the workarounds that I've seen used was basically to just make stuff up. It's like, oh, this bad guy wasn't strong enough. Oh, well, here's another one. I mean, people have done that. I can't really say that I've actually seen a game where it worked well, because I haven't actually seen people do that often enough. But like, so some of the workarounds I've seen, like in one of the 5e games I played, not the Minecraft one, a different one. One of the problems we had was that the guy who was running the module, I don't think he'd actually played this module, and he was just like reading it like, oh, this sounds like standard normal monster stuff. It sounds normal and safe and stuff. And realistically, it wasn't, something that on paper was, anything all that dangerous, honestly. On paper, it was fine. It's just that the way things went, the party basically got ganked by scrub tier mooks. Granted, they're scrub tier mooks who were somehow able to one-shot members of the party. So, that, again, it was a level 1 party. So, level 1 characters, even in 5th edition, aren't that hard to one-shot.
That's fair.
And, well, the workaround that got implemented for this one, though, is, the one party member who didn't get KO'd ran off and found NPCs to kill the enemies for us. I mean, this is one of those I've mentioned before because it was something that was just particularly memorable for just how strangely that entire encounter went. Because on paper, it's fine, but it wasn't fine.
All right. So we're going to go bounce back to number 7 because we bounced down to 8. We're going to go to 7. Wait, hold on. Number 6. My bad. Number 6. Did the character's creative or process feel meaningful when you're was that a possibility for your game ending that they weren't? You know what? I really don't like that question. Let's move on.
Could you say that one again?
Yeah, I'm skipping that one outright.
I mean, if the character creation process or even if the character progression doesn't happen at meaningful times or in meaningful ways, yeah, I think you could probably lose your players' interest. Because if you've gone like 20 sessions of gameplay and you haven't acquired anything, loot, experience, what have you, players might tend to get bored or checked out. Like, well, where's the reward? Like, we're doing all these things, but we're not getting anything in return. And that's part of game design is the way you get players, and this goes for video games, for role-playing games, for just about any type of game in design. The way you get players to do anything with a game is there has to be some kind of reward at the end. It doesn't have to be, a huge reward. It doesn't have to be, anything grandiose, but there has to be a feeling of accomplishment for your players to want to participate. Like that's kind of the purpose of playing anything, is to feel some sense of accomplishment when you have completed the thing. So if your players, if during character creation your players, create some kind of min-maxed monstrosity that is too dumb to figure out how to walk because he put all his points into strength or constitution and put literally fuck all into intelligence, wisdom, charisma, dexterity, then that is going to be a problem.
Yes, I see you also read that Reddit post.
Yes, I did. Fucking Reddit. But if your players aren't progressing in character development wise, like they're not acquiring new loot, they're not acquiring new abilities, new things, for their effort, why would they want to continue to play? Like if they can see some form of progression towards a goal, they will continue to come back. Like that's part of being human, is we want something for the effort we put into things. That's just kind of human nature. We do things to get things in return. So if my whole return system is seeing my XP bar fill up to a point where I get a reward, awesome. If my reward is this succeeding at preventing a plague from overtaking a town, and it took me 5 sessions to finally accomplish that goal, I feel accomplished as a player, because my goal was to prevent a plague from wiping out a town. I succeeded. Awesome. Did I gain anything, monetary or a super ability or whatnot? No, I still accomplished my goal, and I was able to see every step I took along the way to get it.
That's actually one of those things that I've seen mentioned in the past. Okay, granted, I'm going to use a video game analogy again, but like some people really, really like video games where you spend like 5 to 8 hours playing the game and then you're done. And they, it's like, okay, I that game was fun, and now they go play a different game. then there are people such as myself who, if I'm done with the game after 5 hours, I'm like, that's it. That was lame. Because I'm actually this sort of person where it's like, like games like Minecraft, and where it's like, oh well, you are exploring the world, you can rearrange the world to your whim. To me, that's just building stuff is more fun than you know mashing F to progress a story. It's just, but in TTRPG sense though, it's like having players just like randomly wandering around doing stuff might be fun for the players, and even if it's not grand quest of epic whatever destiny or something.
I don't
So,
know.
I do agree with the sentiment that if your players are not progressing in some meaningful way, yeah, you're going to lose your players and you're going to lose your game.
You give them too much of the stick and not enough of the carrot, they'll find some rest at the table.
Well, what
Yep.
I was getting at though is that like you have to gauge that, but based on what the players like, because some players, their idea of reward is different than others, I guess you would say. Uh,
That's fair. I mean, I don't know. I like Assassin's Creed because I beat the game. I've played most of the games, and but I go back and play it again. I it's like, huh? Could I kill that guy easier next time? Where was my misstep? Can I just put a dagger in the guy's face and move on with my life? But no, I get you. I get you. There has to be a process. There has to be a movement of the game for it to keep going, where the players feel like they're not so much needs nor want. No, their needs are being met. Because I want a +2 sword. Well, okay, you might find one. I can buy a +2 sword. Oh, do you have the money? Yeah, well, we could possibly make that happen. I want in. I want in. Do you have a reason? Do you have a reasonable way to get it? Yeah. Okay, we can make it happen because I'm one of those weird DMs that allows magic shops in their campaigns. They're not in every small village out there. They're normally in the metropolises. At least one for every major city. Because I don't want your loot list to be all Oh my God, we found more loot. Let me pull out my checklist of things I freaking need. That drives
I
me up the damn
personally
wall.
love the thing of like, instead of just going to a weapon shop and buying a sword, you find a blacksmith who can forge the sword. The blacksmith gives you a shopping list, and then after you come back with all the stuff on his shopping list, he starts work forging the sword and gets done like a week later.
I completely understand, and I like that idea. I have done that one. I haven't gone fully. Well, I have a magic shop owner named Max that might be,
You're
uh,
welcome.
yeah, instead of being red, he's silver. I did change it a little bit. I'm still
Sure.
using 3.0 rules where if he gets enough of a horde and he eats it, he becomes divine. I always thought that was pretty cool, so I just throw it in there and it's my game, so screw it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Make it your own.
but I completely agree with what everybody is saying. We're about 12 minutes into this,
10
12 minutes
minutes. Yeah,
left.
12.
So I'm gonna see if I can find the last great question before we call it the night. The hold on. All right. Do 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 do.
Oh, this is one
Oh,
you don't have prepared for us. Got it.
what?
Is this one you don't have prepared?
No, they're all prepared. I just some of them
Oh,
might.
okay.
This I actually think is important. We've talked about this before. Uh, did use number 8? Uh, did you man select and incorporate players?
To solicit.
Solicit. I'm sorry. Did
Oh.
you
Ask
solicit? Yeah. Did you solicit and incorporate your players' feedback during or after the game? So your game has hit the wall. Splat. Cake the bed. Did you go back and talk to your players to see what went wrong? Because communication is a key in every relationship. At least that's what the therapist keeps telling me.
Well, that's actually one of those things where it's like that incident with the Kinku swordsman, and the nearly having the party get completely wiped out in an ambush. It's like, yeah, there was a lot of feedback with that one, and I'm genuinely not sure what his takeaway from the feedback was, because, well, one, we didn't end up doing a whole lot of sessions after that, because it's just like the mood of the game just felt weird after that, I guess you could say, and just like wasn't anything even remotely dangerous after that. And, I get the feeling he just like went too far in the other direction. But he did, talk about it and stuff. It's not entirely clear to me exactly what he was trying to do. But overall, feedback is a great idea. It's just you have to carefully implement it. You don't just like, oh, this person didn't like that, therefore I'm going to just completely get rid of it. Sometimes the right answer is to just do it a little bit less, and not, because like scale is an important factor in how much of a problem something can be.
So when it comes to feedback, I do value feedback. Sometimes I might take things as, especially if it's written text, not vocal or not vocalized. If it's written text, I might read it wrong or read too much into it and take it as an affront or as an attack. Because in a lot of ways, our current method of writing does not have emotion infliction in it, or it doesn't have a like I'm saying this wryly kind of subtext to it. It's just written, and sometimes the way it's written, might sound like a personal attack. I've had those situations where I'm like, okay, I need clarification on this. But when I've talked to my players on games that failed, after the game has failed, I ask, okay, what went wrong? Like, where did I go wrong as the game master? And sometimes I get the response of, oh, it was nothing you did. I just got fed up with that one player, or I got fed up with, this thing in the game that, I couldn't figure out. Or, it might have been a mechanic. It might have been the game master. It might have been this, that, the other thing. So when I've gotten feedback, I've taken a hard look at, okay, so this player does not play well with that player. Got it. Not going to invite them to the same table ever. Just not going to happen. This player didn't care for this aspect of the story. What can I change? How do I make it better? How do I engage that player, into the game? So taking feedback, I recommend taking verbal feedback and not written feedback, because again, unless you can read the subtext, I can't read subtext. I miss it every time. Mostly because a lot of the things that I read have or are written in such a way that there's almost no emotion to it. So I don't understand the person's trying to be, relaxed in speech and not, not going, oh yeah, well, if you had done this, differently. And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. But one of the things I got feedback on the Two Worlds One Home game that failed miserably was, again, the players didn't know what their characters were doing and what they needed to accomplish. They had no sense of what to do next at all. And part of it was, I think I'd gone too sandbox on them, and I didn't put enough emphasis on what needed to happen, like what the next step that they needed to figure out was. So, and that's something I had to take as a learning moment as a game master, was that, I needed to give a little more direction. I couldn't just let it be sandbox for the sake of being sandbox. My players needed more direction. I also learned that I shouldn't do grand world tours in the first year of a game. Like, the game is not designed, or should not be designed in such a way that the players start in one location and travel the complete world in under a year, because they're going to miss things, or they're going to not care about certain things. And I needed to reflect on that, like, oh, okay, I need to not do a world tour. I need to focus on the area they're in and the problems that area needs solved. Like, I needed to go macro scale, and focus on just this one area.
Okay, that made me think of two things. One is that when you do like a sandbox hex crawl sort of thing, a lot of players would actually do a spiral grid pattern just because they can, and not go in a set direction. There's like, okay, this is our home base of operations, and just like do like that in concentric rings around their base of operations. Just because. The other thing was that the whole thing about like taking feedback about story direction and stuff, I actually did a video that you can find on my YouTube channel discussing this. I'm not going to go into all the details, but when you watch Dragon Ball Z and look at like big picture, like
oh my god,
the way the story is constructed.
Yeah.
When Toriyama wrote the story, a lot of the times he'd just like, okay, here's the plot, here's what we're doing, and then be done with it. But
he was a lazy writer. Even he said he was a lazy writer.
Yeah, I know. There's actually an interview where so someone asked him why he stopped writing the one of the characters in stories, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that I actually forgot that I created that character."
That's why Trunks nor Goten were born with tails. He forgot that they originally were supposed to be born with tails.
Actually, the explanation I remember is that drawing Saiyan tails was annoying and he didn't like doing it.
I can believe both of them. It's just, yeah,
because he was a proper mangaka and he both wrote the story and drew it. Anyway, though, but what I was going with though was that when you look at the like skeletal framework version of the stories that he wrote, one thing you'll notice is that the way that they play out tends to take certain like twists and stuff, and the stories tend to flow in a very measured fashion, unless you look at the Android Saga, because the Android Saga, it doesn't do the same like starting hook, lead up, and final encounter thing that so many of his others do. Android Saga just kind of like starts, stops, starts again, stops again, and well, real world, the reason that it did that is because Toriyama really wasn't confident in how he was writing the story. So one of the people that he knew personally, that who he respected, he was asking him for feedback and be like, okay, do you think this is a good idea? And he's like, oh, well, you should do something kind of different like that. And then he would do something else. And it's like, well, okay, maybe do this instead, which when you look at the opening credits for that they do for the Android Saga episodes of Dragon Ball Z, you'll see this image of a kind of like silhouette of an android. That's actually the image that was the prototype antagonist that Toriyama had come up with as the original big bad guy for the end of the us Android story arc. It's just that one, he'd done that twice before in the original Dragon Ball with Android 8 and Major Metallatron. And it was basically just that, but slightly different. And the guy he talked to was like, that you did that before. That's not very interesting. So he makes up Dr. Giro and the other android, which the feedback he got from them is like, okay, so it's a fat guy and an old geezer. And then, which is actually how he then gets to Android 17 and 18, which in universe, Android 17 and 18 show up before Giro and Android 19, but real world, they were actually created after them, because the characters were actually created in the order that they appear in the Dragon Ball Z anime. And in the main anime, you don't see 17 and 18 until after Giro and Android 19. Well, those, it's like, okay, but these guys are just a bunch of punks. They're just like teenagers who, they just look like regular teenagers.
That's fair. But we are past the 2-hour mark. I've asked some of the questions I want to ask, and you guys heard some of the questions that were written down. I want to say thanks to the panel for being here tonight. I had fun hosting this. And Jay, do you want to take us out?
Sure. So, if you haven't already done so, consider subscribing to this channel and the other channels linked in the video's description. I'm sure it'll be done post-script. If you enjoyed tonight's comment, please consider hitting that like button, as it lets us know that we're producing content you like. If you don't like the content, you can also feel free to hit that dislike button. It tells us what we did wrong. Just like when a game goes off the rails and we don't know where to go, sometimes we need to know that from our viewers for the YouTube content. If you want to, please leave a comment on this video or other videos with a question that you might have about gaming and gaming-related topics. And we'll be sure to try to include that in an episode at some point. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.